This is the Crowdcrux Crowdfunding Podcast with Sal Briggman, where we cover everything you need to know to launch a successful crowdfunding campaign. We speak with proven entrepreneurs who've raised money from the crowd and want to teach you how to do the same. Stay tuned because we're about to reveal how to launch your dream project. With your host, Sal Briggman.
Before we get started with this podcast episode, I want to take a second to introduce you to my friends at Fulfillrite. If you need help shipping out your Kickstarter or Indiegogo perks or rewards, Fulfillrite is the absolute best company for you. I've been working with them for a while and I can vouch for their services. They make it dead simple and take all of the headache out of shipping out all of those boxes, all of those orders to your backers and your customers. If you want to check them out, go to fulfillrite.com at fulfillrite.com. What up, crowdfunders? Salvador Briggman here. Welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. If you have not yet checked out this podcast before, we dive in deep and we get into every aspect of raising money with crowdfunding on Kickstarter, on Indiegogo, basically all the things that you need to know if you want to successfully raise money from the crowd. And that goes from marketing, that goes from prototyping, that also goes to the fulfillment stage. And today, I want to kind of devote today's show to board game fulfillment advice. If you're thinking about doing a board game on Kickstarter, this episode is going to be especially tailored for you in terms of how to actually fulfill your own rewards. And in addition, if you're thinking about maybe outsourcing that to a fulfillment company, we'll get into that a little bit. And we're going to answer everything you have when it comes to board game fulfillment specifically. But this is also going to be super applicable for anyone out there that is going to be fulfilling rewards on Kickstarter or Indiegogo. We're going to really go deep into some of those different key terms when it comes to fulfillment, as well as understanding some of the differences between like supply chain and fulfillment, understanding actually shipping versus actually packaging everything together. How long does this take? What are the things that go into it? What are the costs? All these different things. It's a really underrepresented part of the process. You know, I think it's the sexy or the interesting part is actually raising funds. And it's really cool. I love that part, you know, seeing thousands of people or thousands of backers around the world supporting your work and then getting the funding to actually go out there and to build a business. That is freaking awesome, man. But you also got to deliver those rewards, otherwise your brand is gonna stink. You know, the worst thing in the world is to have a bunch of angry customers, and that all comes down to the actual supply chain, the logistics, and also the fulfillment side of doing those rewards. So we're getting super in-depth into that today. In addition, I got a great resource for you here. If you are interested in incorporating some of the strategies we've been talking about on some of the other episodes on this podcast, I have a free course for you that goes in deep. It goes very in depth into number one, how to launch a campaign successfully. Number two, how to incorporate PR or public relations into that actual launch. And finally, some of the sort of techniques I would say that are almost virtually guaranteed to work when it comes to crowdfunding. So the link that I put together there for you is crowdcrux.com/PR. That is crowdcrux.com/PR. And if you're interested at all in getting media attention, I think it's a really worth a while to just enter your name and email. You'll start getting emails from me, get really up to speed with the whole PR element of the campaign. Without further ado, let's get into today's podcast episode. Hey guys, welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. Excited to introduce you to a guru when it comes to board game fulfillment and shipping. We're talking with Brandon, the head and in charge of marketing at Fulfillrite. And today's topic of conversation, you know, board games I think have been killer and tabletops have been growing so much on Kickstarter. And I really want to cover what happens after you have a successful campaign and really the whole fulfillment and shipping process, as well as any advice that he has for you guys who are just getting started. Brandon, welcome to the show.
Well, hello. Thank you for having me on.
I'd love if we could get started. If you could share with the audience just kind of bite-size, a little bit of your background, Brandon, the game dev, and also the work you do with Fulfillrite.
Sure, it's an absurd one. What I've done, I started out as an MBA student, and a little bit after I graduated college, I had this idea for a childhood dream. I wanted to make this card game based on a TV show I saw when I was little. I did that. I kickstarted it, funded successfully. A little bit after that, I just started blogging about making games. I knew I was still pretty fresh, and I just wanted to capture it while it was new and raw and help people understand that first time around. Shortly after that, the blog superseded anything I had done with games because it just started growing more than I expected. And that opened up opportunities to become to
help on that, on those
marketer,
elements.
yeah.
Well, when it came to that, do you think it's because more and more people now can easily create card games or tabletops? Like, why do you think it grew that way?
Oh, goodness. I've probably done a blog post on that recently, but I think it's a mix of the internet made it possible for people to connect over just any obscure hobby you could think of for the first time. So like before the modern board game boom, the only real hobby game you had was Catan. And then after that, Ticket to Ride. Social media shows up, people can connect about all sorts of things. And this hobby, which was already starting to grow through earlier forms of media before social media, it just like took off like wildfire after that. At the same time, a really connected world makes people want to actually have in-person physical experiences, and board games do that in a way that video games can't.
Yeah, there's also been tons of other communities like Board Game Geek, and also just massive board games that have been launched on Kickstarter. You know, some of the ones you've had on the show, like millions of dollars, and people around the world discovering it.
It's the perfect storm because in addition to everything I had just said, you have Kickstarter changing the way that people fund projects in a profound way very, very quickly. You have you just have a lot of different factors media, all at once.
Yeah.
The supply chain changed.
Totally, yeah. So I want to get a bit into that, but just really to quickly put this in a context, in the last few years, over 900 million has been pledged to gaming projects on Kickstarter. And also in 2017, board games received 137 million compared to 100 million in 2016. So it's growing pretty rapidly, you know?
Holy moly. And how many years was that? You said 3 years?
Yeah, so I had from my data here, it started off in 2015 with 84 million, a little bit over 100 million in 2016, and then 137 million in 2017 for tabletop games.
Holy smokes, that's like 25% of board game money is coming through Kickstarter in some way.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. But, you know, the topic of the podcast today, while you might have a successful project and you raise a bunch of money, there are obligations that come with that. Like after you raise money, you then have to ship out this board game. You have to do the supply chain. You have to do the fulfillment. So I kind of want to get started here asking you a little bit about your experience with fulfillment and maybe a tip or two here that you've learned along the way.
Sure. I'll tell you, I did it the hard way the first time. When my first Kickstarter was complete, I had 100 or so rewards to fulfill. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was somewhere in that ballpark. And what I did is I actually had that freight shipped to a warehouse somewhere near my home in Chattanooga. And I picked up those goods myself, put them in the back of my Toyota Camry, and then I drove them to my house. Like I had like 3,000 decks of card game in my in my car and also in my brother's car as well because he helped me haul that. So I very quickly had to learn about warehousing and shipping and postage and how you pack all these things and do it in a clean way. And it took me several hours to get this done.
Yeah,
and
totally.
I had made a conscious choice not to go with a fulfillment company at that time, but looking back, I would have actually just had somebody do it for me.
And there are also like things you don't even consider, like what if you're shipping internationally, you know, and then other kind of duties might come into play or taxes that you might not be aware of. So when you were doing that experience yourself, what was the most like time intensive portion of that experience?
Well, first thing I had to do was sort them all out into different SKUs because they all came in the same boxes. So I had 6 different SKUs, and a SKU is just a unique item. So I had 6 different decks of cards. I had to sort them all first. That took hours alone. And then I had to get a spreadsheet showing everybody's order, pick the right deck of cards, and make sure that I had them all in like distinct packages for that. I'd put a little marking on that, and that would remind me to put a label on that later.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it was kind of nuts. You should have seen my living room at the time. I had an apartment.
Yeah.
This was
Just
right
cover
before
the
I became
floor,
a
right?
homeowner. Yeah. Oh, it was all over the living room floor. I still have photos somewhere.
And then like you print out the labels of the people that you're going to ship to, is that, and then put in UPS or?
What I had actually done for most of them was USPS. So you can use software. Well, you can use the free stuff on the Postal Service site, or you can use PayPal to print postage too. But what I had actually done was use stamps.com because they have cheaper postage, and you just bulk upload all those addresses like in a just a flat file, a CSV file, and it automatically populates what it needs to in order to create the postage. Person one has this address, person two has this address, and so on. Once you get all that together, you have to print that on the correct kind of paper on, well, I had an inkjet printer, which was another mistake all on its own.
Oh my.
But yeah, that's what you have to do.
Yeah, and also, it seems like the process is you get the product manufactured, you then get that shipped to your house, then you have to figure out basically all the different SKUs, as you said, get it all packaged, and then ship it out, and then possibly also deal with any kind of returns that you get.
That's right. That's right. And now, thankfully, I've had very, very, very few returns, but that's also something you have to account for. You need people to be able to send it back to an address, preferably one that's not your residence. I was smart enough to get a P.O. box at the time. And you have to have a process for managing that, inspecting inventory to see if it's still sellable, and so on.
Did you have
don't
to
want to make them pay for shipping.
Yeah. Did you, when it came to like the shipping internationally, was that a factor at all with your campaign?
Thankfully, that wasn't that bad because I had actually used an international warehouse for that. I had a relatively small quantity that had to go overseas, so I used GamesQuest at the time. And I don't know what they're up to these days, and I can't necessarily recommend them anymore, but they had handled that. They were centered in the UK, so they were part of the European Union at the time that was fulfilled, and it got out to the rest of the world without a whole bunch of duties being applied.
Okay. So when it came to you making that decision of, I want to take on this task myself, maybe not realizing how onerous and how time intensive it was, why is it that you chose that over a fulfillment company?
At the time, it was just simple cost benefit analysis. Now, that said, to be honest, fulfillment's usually not that much more expensive, and in many cases it's cheaper. But in this particular case, it was a little more expensive because I had a lot of what's called pick and pack, which is at different SKUs and stuff like that. And so I was being cheap, and I wanted to save $300 or whatever it was, something that in retrospect I wouldn't have cared about so much.
A lot of these campaigners that I talk to, if you have 1,000 orders to fulfill, you have 500. A lot of it also is, if you are playing the role of a creator, it kind of makes sense to do it yourself because you're like, hey, I made this thing, like I'm going to ship it, I'm going to do all the work. But if you're having the mindset more so of a business owner, you want to remove yourself from the process. You want to create a system that's well lubricated from manufacturer to shipping to dealing with delays, and you want to kind of remove yourself from that process.
No, I will make one case for when you want to fulfill on your own. If you have a really small amount of orders, like 200 or less, you might want to, if there's not a whole lot of pick and pack like I had to do with my own game. Likewise, if you just want to do it yourself and see what it's like, just for the experience, just for the know-how, that's a good reason too. But just about any other reason, just about any other larger quantity than 200 units, don't even bother doing it yourself. That's where you should get a pro.
Yeah. So one big misconception, it seems like, is that fulfillment actually is like super expensive and it's hard to do, but actually it seems like it's not as expensive as you think. And it's also something where if you have 200 or more, you definitely should be doing it. What's another like misconception that you tend to find of people that when they think about fulfillment?
Oh, goodness. Misconceptions about fulfillment. A lot of people think that fulfillment is the supply chain. Like, they don't make a distinction between fulfillment and supply chain. Two very different concepts. And I suppose I probably should clarify on that. Supply chain is the entire process of getting things manufactured and the materials for them sourced, if you must do that as well. You got to get that shipped on a boat or on a plane or wherever to the final destination warehouse, where it is then fulfilled. That is, packages are made and then sent to different carriers like UPS, USPS, FedEx, and then sent to somebody's home. That entire run-on sentence of a description is the supply chain. Fulfillment is just one part. It's just a part that is really easy to screw up on your own.
I think it's also the part where, like, you think like maybe your inventory is automatically put into the cloud or like put into an Excel spreadsheet. If you're doing your own fulfillment, you kind of have to do that yourself. Like, you have to keep track of your own inventory. So a lot of fulfillment I also learned is about barcode scanning. And
absolutely.
Actually keeping track of your different levels of inventory and these different things. That's kind of like more of a systemized modern way. You kind of how Amazon does it or how a fulfillment center does it.
Absolutely. Those barcodes are just nothing but numbers. They are numbers coded into the width of different lines and the width of the spaces between them. With a very simple reader, you can read off a unique number, and that is used to number every single different kind of item in a gigantic warehouse like Fulfillrite or Amazon. It makes it so much easier when you imagine things as simple, distinct numbers, simple, distinct barcodes, than as saying, well, this product, and trying to actually physically describe it in relation to something else. Barcodes are the backbone of a lot of these fulfillment centers.
I had to interrupt this podcast episode because I want to introduce you to my friends at The Gadget Flow. Their product discovery platform reaches 22 million people per month. They've helped more than 5,000 crowdfunding campaigns thus far, and they have a social media following of more than 700,000 followers. If you want to gain access to their marketplace and list your own product, you can go to thegadgetflow.com/submit and list your project today. When it comes to board games, how would you say that a board game's fulfillment or that sort of phase is different from other projects? Because like other types of campaigns might have, fragile components, or you might have a gadget or a gizmo. How do you think board games are different than some of the other products on Kickstarter?
Now, thankfully, board games are simple in some ways. They don't have like lithium batteries or anything in them. They don't have hazardous materials that you have to apply like a class 9 label to or something. They don't require a lot of fuss when it comes to that. Where they get tricky is just trying to make sure that you have the right size box for them, because board games are actually relatively large objects. And if you're not very careful about the size of the board game you're making, you can end up using a box that's like $15 to ship with the postage. I mean, a lot of companies these days will actually make board games around the size of the U.S. Post Service's flat rate mailers. They'll make a board game that they just make board games that slide right into those. You put a little extra bubble wrap on them so the corners get bent or anything, and that's the way they'll optimize for shipping costs. If your game is just slightly too big to fit in that box, the next step up is often very expensive.
So let me ask you kind of a dumb question here. Like, when I see a board game or I order a board game, I just kind of get it in the mail. Like I see that it's already been boxed and everything. So the finished game, like put in the box and everything, you receive that, or do you put that together at the fulfillment center?
A lot of time, well, most of the time, in fact, every case I've heard of, the manufacturer will put that together on their end. One, because it's easier usually to assemble it in the factory, and two, because the labor is cheaper because it's usually done overseas. But if you really wanted to, you could have your fulfillment do the assembly for you. They could pop the top off the box and put different parts inside, and that's called I have to double check. That's called kitting, I believe. I'd actually have to double check and make sure I'm using that word correctly.
Okay. What about these other things I see? Like when I buy something on Amazon or buy something on Shopify, a lot of the times there's also like a package insert, like a marketing insert or something like that. Like that tells me some other like exclusive deal that's only special for me.
Fulfillment centers can do that.
Oh, okay. So so they do that. That's
yes, they can do that for you.
Okay. Because I think that's actually really powerful, because you can get people on, interested in your next game, or you can build anticipation, or if you have other games, you can use that to sell that.
Oh, yeah. And often little stuff like that goes a long way. Like, I have one of those faux handwritten notes from, like, I don't know, something really boring, like a financial institution, like a stock brokerage, from a marketing insert that they had just popped into a box of something else. Because, like, that stuff makes an impression. I was like, this is good marketing right here. And so I nailed it up on my bulletin board.
So let me ask you a bit of a difficult question here.
Sure.
I think that as an entrepreneur, your brand kind of lives and breathes on your ability to get out products. And I think a really big concern for entrepreneurs is shipping speed and time. And they're like, well, at least if I'm in charge of my own fulfillment, I can act on this today, or I can act on this tomorrow. Like, I'm more in control, versus when you have a third party partner, you're kind of leaning on them for that side of the process. How fast do you guys at Fulfillrite like do this? What's like a common expectation there?
A lot of times they can actually turn around the inventory either same day or the day after. Like, unless they are really, really bogged down, that's the time frame that they keep themselves to. And it's one that most people cannot keep up with on their own as an indie.
So pretty much, if you get an order, you get it out within that day or the next day.
That's correct.
Okay. Because I think that would be honestly a concern. Like, it's always hard having a partner in your business because you kind of give away a little bit of the control and a little bit of the power.
Giving away power to your business it's a scary thing. And I'll tell you this is actually where I'm at, because I am I've got more hours of work to do than I can possibly do on my own. And this is like the first time this has happened in a very visceral, real way. So in order to survive, in order to grow the business, I have to start delegating. And I will say, fulfillment's just about the easiest thing to delegate. Simply because it's a complex process, but it's one that can be streamlined very well by people who know what they're doing. And they know they've got to keep up to high standards because Amazon's doing 2-day shipping. That's who they have to compete with. That's where customer perception is set.
Yeah. I think crowdfunding is a little bit actually unique in that like you're kind of fulfilling in the next couple of months, whereas Amazon's like a 2-day shipping. It's kind of interesting.
It is a bizarre little thing. I never stop having just kind of a droll fascination with that as a marketer, that people are willing to buy something and wait like 4 or 5 months to get it or longer. And
it's kind of exciting though, like, because you're like waiting for it. I can't wait until I get this.
I honestly think that's part of the feature. Really, I think that's part of the benefit. I'm not joking, because I continue to do it too. I back Kickstarters, and I'll get it 5-6 months later after I forgot I backed it.
I'm like, oh my God,
I just get something
here
in the mail, and I'm like, a Kickstarter I forgot I backed. Somebody's board game I forgot I bought.
Yeah, definitely. I gotta ask you, man. There obviously are different fulfillment companies out there, and I love working with Fulfillrite for the years I have. But for the audience, like, how does it differ from doing something like, I don't know, fulfillment by Amazon, or, using a large provider like that to manage your fulfillment for your campaign and also, afterwards?
The main difference is that Fulfillrite is big enough to be able to do things really quickly and in a timely way that's really efficient, but they're small enough to talk to you as an individual. You don't have to necessarily research every single detail on your own. Somebody will help talk you through the parts that you don't understand.
And this is at Fulfillrite, like
That's right.
Yeah. So when you can't really call up Amazon, I guess, in that way.
Not very easily, no. And like a large part of what I'm doing is just finding every confusing concept I possibly can in this gigantic industry and writing about it. Writing as much as I can about it. Because I obviously, we want to generate leads. I'm a marketer at heart. Sue me. we got to pull in leads, but I want people to read stuff and say, I actually feel like I understand this, and this company is actually talking to me in a way that I understand about a very complicated subject.
It is so sorely needed too, because even I'll like look at different marketing or different like fulfillment websites. I'm like, what is a parcel? Like, what is an SKU? What are these different things? It's almost like a different language for someone who's never. Yeah, it's like a language when you're first discovering that.
Oh, yeah. The first time you read any kind of supply chain website, it's like you're reading Portuguese. I like, because I don't understand Portuguese. It's just that complicated.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's something that I would love to see also you guys do more, honestly. Like we try and do that with some of our YouTube videos and the podcast and such like this one. But I would love to, have you guys put out more stuff like that. It seems like you're starting to do that a little bit more.
Chipping away at it week by week. I don't know when this podcast is going up, but I've got at least 5 blog posts in the hopper that have not actually seen the light of day yet. They're just sitting there ready to be posted. So we're trying to build up a backlog first, just in case I get sick or something.
So I just have like 1 or 2 more questions for you here. One being, you've seen sort of both sides of the table. Like you've seen the creator side and you've also seen the marketer side. What's something else that you would like to share with the audience when it comes to this like pivotal phase of their campaign that you wish they knew or you think that would be really valuable for them to know?
I may go in a different direction with this if you don't mind.
Okay.
I feel like the most important part of a campaign, it's not the fulfillment necessarily, although that's very important. It's not the launch day. It's not any of that. It's the moment you say to yourself that I'm actually going to launch something. It's that creation of the product and how you gather requirements and find an audience. What I'm getting at is product market fit, making sure you're making something that people really, really want. That's the most important thing to nail down. You can get marketing 80% wrong and still do okay if you have a product that people are really attracted to.
Mm-hmm. And for you, what does that mean exactly, product market fit?
It is, oh boy. Okay, I'm going to get a little bit of philosophical with this one. Value is subjective. Everybody likes different things. Nobody likes the same things. And understanding this, you have to find a group of people who think similarly enough to be attracted to a certain kind of product or service, whatever it is. You have to figure out what the specific, very important specific group of people are feeling, what drives their behavior, and so on. And you have to observe, and you have to pay attention, and sometimes you won't get it right. You'll have to iterate too. But if you pay attention enough and you really start to understand what a specific group of people wants, that's how you make something with good product market fit.
Okay. So it kind of comes from, I think a lot of creators are like, hey, I want this thing to exist. Or like, wouldn't this be really cool? And then they go out there and make it and like no one buys it. It's kind of right. Taking a step before that and being like, what are people liking to play? Or like, what Absolutely. Are they really hungry for or wanting to play with their friends? What kind of experience do they want? And kind of working back from that and almost, seeing what elements maybe your creative ideas have that fit into that.
Absolutely. And if you want to make a product for you, if you want to make a product that is a dream of yours and you don't want to make it for a market, you can still go to Kickstarter and that's fine, but you will have a lesser chance of success. It's still worth it, in my opinion, to do something that isn't necessarily tailored for an audience if you're there to learn, if you're there to make a vision of yours become a reality. But if you're trying to make like $1 million, you got to ask yourself what people are really into first.
Yes, I think like to tap into any large audience, there has to naturally be a group of people out there that are looking for something like that.
One little side project of mine is I actually went to the Smoky Mountains this weekend because I was doing research for someone to see if there was a market for a certain kind of game in that region. Mm-hmm. Just to see if that was possible. That's how important it is to really get a feel for if people want something. You got to be willing to go out of your way to find it.
Always be observing. And one of the things that kind of has really taken me by surprise is the way in which, particularly with the board game category on Kickstarter, we see entrepreneurs and creative types launching like game after game. Like there are people out there that have 20 games on Kickstarter or like, 10 games. So it's not like just because you launch one and it doesn't work, you can't do it again. Or, you do one and then you can do another one. It's a different in that way from some of the other categories that I see.
Sometimes a good company will flop. It happens. I've seen it happen to my friends. I've had a campaign go sideways. Like you go out there and you can try 10 different ideas. And if 5 of them work, that's a win. Mm-hmm. As long as you don't spend a truly enormous amount of money on one particular one or something.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like the whole saying, you have to play to win, not play to not lose. That's a really good quote. So my last question for you here, you've shared a lot of great tips and advice when it comes to, your own findings, your own realizations about Kickstarter, a little bit on the fulfillment side there. I guess the final question I have for you is, are there any tools that you recommend that creators look into that helped you? Obviously Fulfillrite is one of those tools that can be a partner in your business. Are there any other tools or websites or things you think that could be helpful to people?
I'm a big fan of anything that frees up your time so you can do creative work. I love Buffer because you can plan out a week's worth of social media posts in like 30 minutes. You just schedule it in advance. I think you can link up to 3 without paying anything, and you can link more than that if you pay like 10, 15 a month. Mm-hmm. That's one thing. I'd look into Gleam. Gleam is a platform, you have to pay for it, that allows you to run contests. Because contests tend to be a pretty good way of drumming up attention if you are not sure how to start. I do a lot of these on the Pangea Games group, which I run. They're also a good way of figuring out what people really like in an empirical way, too. Gleam is fantastic for that. If you're making a website, I'd just go ahead and use WordPress. That's a little bit of a basic tip, but just about everybody needs a website.
Yeah, WordPress or Shopify usually pretty easy.
Yep. You can probably integrate Shopify and WordPress. Mm-hmm. Figure you can. And let me think. One last one is MailChimp. So you can send out emails, and they don't take too much time to make, and they're free up to 2,000 subscribers last I checked.
Very good tips. Brandon, it's been a pleasure to talk with you. Where can people go to see some of those articles you got in the hopper that are going to be coming out soon?
The easiest way to find out what I'm doing is to go to brandonthegamedev.com.
Great. Awesome. And for those that are interested, also, we'll be sure to link up Fulfillrite in the show notes. You can check them out. And they've always been super great about answering questions and all these different things. So make sure that you reach out if you do have any questions there. But Brandon, thank you so much for coming on the show, and we'll have to have you back.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Let me tell you about our latest sponsor, SendPro Online by Pitney Bowes. Shipping can be complex. Things can get really confusing really fast. With SendPro Online, it's easy to save time and money no matter what you send, from letters and packages to overnights and flats. You can easily compare USPS, UPS, and FedEx in an all-in-one online tool. You can print shipping labels and stamps directly from your printer. You can even track all of your shipments and get email notifications when they've arrived. SendPro Online is only $14.99 a month, and listeners can get a free 30-day trial when you visit pb.com/crowdcrux. That's pb.com/crowdcrux. Experience the convenience of SendPro Online for yourself when you sign up for a free 30-day trial. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. My name is Salvador Briggman. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. Also, I have a YouTube channel out there by the same name. We have the blog, crowdcrux.com. We have the kickstarterforum.org. So many different resources for you to dive in deep and to learn about crowdfunding. I really hope that you got some value out of today's episode, whether that's maybe understanding the process more behind board game fulfillment specifically, or what you got to do after crowdfunding, and also, the story behind this particular entrepreneur, or I guess creative type, you can say, and his story of actually growing a brand based around something that he loves to do, and how that actually can happen with crowdfunding, with Kickstarter, with Indiegogo, with any other crowdfunding platform out there. It's so amazing to me that you can actually grow a tribe of people online who are bought into you, who love what they love. They're part of your tribe. They're interested in buying the products that you're putting out there. It's so inspiring to me. It's so exciting. And I just want that for you, man. Like, I want the exact same thing for you. I've seen so many creators who have done that. We've cataloged it on this podcast. More than 200 people who've successfully launched campaigns, and there are thousands more out there. But my goal here is always to bring those authentic stories to you, and also the strategies and the techniques. So I hope you take a second to subscribe to this podcast. I also hope that leave me a rating and review on iTunes, and we'll go from there. But finally, if you want to level up your game even more, got a ton of value out of today's episode, and you're like, man, I'm excited. I want to get started. You can go to this link, crowdcrux.com/PR. That is crowdcrux.com/PR, crowdcrux.com/PR. Kickstarter.com/PR. Just go to that link and enter your name and email address, and I will start getting you up to speed on not only crowdfunding tips and advice and some of the strategies that are virtually guaranteed to do really well on Kickstarter, but also the PR and the media component behind a successful Kickstarter campaign. Hope you enjoy it. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you next time.